Hi, this is Mike Fry, and you are listening to the We Effing Told You So podcast. Today is September 29, 2025. Today's edition is Not All Election Denial is the Same. More evidence that the current regime stole the last election keeps coming in. Pointing that out is not the same as what MAGA did after the 2020 election, when they claimed fraud with zero evidence. So, denying reality can take multiple forms. You could, for example, as MAGA crazies did after the 2020 election, scream that the election was stolen with absolutely zero evidence to prove it. You could, as they did, violently attack the U.S. Capitol, again with no evidence of fraud in the election. You could then, as they did, continue to scream non-fact-based reality at the top of your lungs for years, even after losing more than 60 lawsuits because they had no evidence to show. It takes a special kind of crazy to continue believing a wild conspiracy with absolutely zero facts or evidence to support it. We should note that many MAGAs still do believe their insanity, which makes rational and sane people roll their eyes, sigh, and then feel shame for being the same species as people like that. That kind of reality denial is enough to make people gasp at the magnitude of the insanity. It's like craziness so vast and expansive it's hard to take in all at once, like looking out into the unimaginable and vast beauty of the Grand Canyon, except there's absolutely nothing beautiful about their denial at all. There is another kind of reality denying that's probably almost as bad. When you refuse to look at the data and evidence that's right in front of your face because the data does not support your belief system, narrative, or is otherwise too challenging to your view of the world to accept. So you write off the evidence, you ignore it, pretend it isn't there, find ways to nitpick at the edges of it to avoid giving it a meaningful review, etc., etc. That latter kind of denial of reality is exactly what Democrats have been doing since the 2024 election. Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez once said, she thinks Democratic lawmakers are too concerned with appearances and not nearly concerned enough with policy. We think that is correct, and that issue is at the epicenter of why Democrats keep ignoring the waves of evidence pouring in that Felon 47 stole the 2024 election with technical help from Elon Musk. The evidence comes from multiple reliable sources with easily verifiable public data that these experts share openly and transparently, all of which points to that conclusion. Cybersecurity experts began publicly begging Democrats to call for recounts after the 2024 election because they knew the election system had been breached. In one public letter to Kamala Harris dated November 13, 2024, and signed by a plethora of credentialed, esteemed data and cybersecurity experts, the authors wrote, quote, in 2022, records, video camera footage, and deposition testimony produced in a civil case in Georgia disclosed that its voting system, used statewide, had been breached over multiple days by operatives hired by attorneys for Donald Trump. The evidence showed that the operatives made copies of the software that runs all of the equipment in Georgia and certain other states and shared it with other Trump allies and operatives. Subsequent court filings and public records requests revealed that the breaches in Georgia were part of a larger effort to take copies of voting system software from systems in Michigan, Pennsylvania, Colorado, and Arizona, and to share the software in the operatives' networks. According to testimony and declarations by some of the technicians who have obtained copies of the software, they've had access for more than 3 years to the software for the central servers, tabulators and highly restricted elections databases for both election systems and software, or ES&S, and Dominion Voting Systems, the two largest voting system vendors, constituting the most severe election security breach publicly known. End quote. To state all of that in its simplest form, by the time the 2024 election came along, MAGA cronies had access to voting systems and servers and had copies of the election system software in their hands and were spreading it around for more than 3 years. Nothing about that or any of the other things they wrote in their letter to Harris was controversial. There were news reports about those events for years. People lost their jobs, some went to jail, and those were not the only hair-on-fire facts these data security experts outlined, collectively spelling out a strong case that the election was stolen. Their only suggestion, and we have to say now that it was a very mild one, was to insist on specific recounts in specific areas of the country. And what did Democrats do with that information? Not a damn thing. They ignored them, discounted them, tried to look the other way, and when people tried to bring it up, they said things like, "I don't want to be like one of those election deniers." We say, well, how about you at least look at the data before you decide? If you don't want to or won't, you're no better than the people who scream that the earth is flat because they don't want to look at the information we now have available about the solar system and beyond. For the record, the above letter is one of several that were sent to Democrats by technology and cybersecurity experts screaming their heads off, saying that Democrats needed to demand recounts. There's another one titled Duty to Warn, which includes details about how MAGA probably accomplished it with Musk's help, and it's dated November 15, 2024. Instead of heeding these warnings, Democrats decided to not even look and pointed to so-called fact-checkers who fact-checked the claims of these experts and who themselves got most of their facts wrong. For example, most fact-checkers concluded that it was impossible for the election systems to be hacked because voting machines are not connected to the internet. That's wrong for two reasons. First, anyone with even a basic understanding of hacking knows that a computer can be hacked via any type of network connection, not just an internet one. Computers can also be hacked via flash drive, disk, or any other physical device. Second, while voting machines are not connected to the internet during the election, they are connected to the internet between elections, making it possible, easy even, to install malware that would change the results during or after the election. Furthermore, vote tabulating machines are connected to a cellular network during the election, so they can send data to centralized servers. In other words, the primary excuses these fact-checkers used to dismiss the alarms raised by a trove of data and cybersecurity experts were completely bogus. And you don't even have to think hard or long about the fact-checkers' statements to realize that they were bogus. People didn't believe these experts for one reason and one reason alone. They didn't want to. As bad as that is, it gets even worse, because all of the election tampering that likely occurred didn't all happen with complex technology systems. As we previously reported, award-winning investigative journalist Greg Palast painstakingly detailed various ways Republicans erased 3,565,000 votes. And they did it right out in the open, right in front of our faces. Republicans, for example, recruited teams of vigilantes to challenge the votes of people of color. Each vigilante challenged the votes of thousands of people whom they knew nothing about, other than knowing that they had Black or Hispanic-sounding names and lived in Democrat-leaning districts. When questioned about their activities, multiples of these vigilantes admitted that they knew nothing about these people whose votes they were erasing. Republicans in the states where this happened needed to change the election laws in those states to allow these vigilantes to do that work. And as we said earlier, they did it all right out in the open. The data is public and readily available and verifiable. There's literally no doubt or question that it happened. When Republicans were changing the laws in order to allow that to happen, people were screaming that this would be the result. We watched it unfold in front of our very eyes, and still people are trying to pretend that it never happened. Changing election laws to allow for vigilante vote challengers and then recruiting vigilantes to challenge these votes required coordination from Republicans in multiple states with the clear intention of disenfranchising voters and manipulating the outcome of the vote. If that doesn't equate to election interference and cheating, then nothing does. Add in the numerous other methods documented by Palast that Republicans absolutely did use in 2024 to steal the election, and then ask yourself this question. Would people willing to do these things out in the open have any qualms about using the technology they had in their hands to rig the election electronically as well? If you think people who cheated that much out in the open would not also work secretly to rig the election even more with technology that they already had in their hands, then the cognitive dissonance in your brain is pretty extreme. Enter the lawsuit in New York from the nonpartisan SMART legislation and SMART elections. In June of 2025, a federal judge reviewed hard data from these groups that shows districts in New York that included many votes for down-ballot Democrats, but not a single vote for Harris. Let that sink in. That case is currently moving forward in large part because of the compelling data presented by the plaintiffs in court, and still not a peep from the leadership on the left. It seems to us that they're too afraid of appearing as loony election deniers to even be bothering to look at the data. That's the most generous explanation we can come up with. In other words, to echo Ocasio-Cortez, they're more concerned with appearances than substance. Now new data is coming out that makes the case that the election was stolen even stronger, this time from a group of data and cybersecurity experts with Election Truth Alliance. They're analyzing election data from all over the USA and finding anomalies in it that, according to Nathan Taylor, their executive director of public engagement, appear, quote, algorithmic, or in layman's terms, manipulated by computer software. Taylor recently appeared on the David Pakman Show and discussed some of their early reports in detail. Much of the discussion of the data was accompanied by visual slides, so rather than sharing much of it here, we encourage everyone to click the link on our blog to watch it themselves. We'll share some of his comments in a minute, but before we do, we feel we have to point out how Pakman tried to cover his own ass for writing off the Palast report. He completely misrepresented it. Have a listen.
Greg Palast put out a piece some time ago. I looked at the piece. The piece made a number of claims that I found to be a little too circumstantial for me to make a definitive statement about 2024. They included extrapolations of prior, for example, black voter behavior in terms of the split between Democrats and Republicans, assumptions about changes to the number of registered voters, extrapolating from that in some cases with 8 or 10-year-old data to make claims about 2024.
Notice he said that he looked at Palast's report. He didn't say he analyzed it or even that he read it in detail. He said he simply looked at it. Then he says that because the report included some extrapolations, he didn't feel comfortable with it. He wrote it off, apparently without much thought. It seems he likely didn't want to appear to be one of those loony election deniers on the right, so was reluctant to take the Palast report seriously. Again, writing off data because of your feelings isn't much better than believing something with no evidence. To his credit, though, Pachman did at least dive deep into the reports Election Truth Alliance has begun publishing. Early on, Taylor felt a need to point out that their work isn't based on, quote, election denial. Have a listen.
Just want to make that clear. This is not election denial. This is election integrity and auditing. This is a standard practice. And because of that mindset, we said, okay, let's do this. If you can apply statistics to detect fraud in banking, if you can apply statistics to do safety and quality testing and engineering, why can't we use statistics to flag non-human or abnormal voting behavior that could mean vote manipulation?
Election Truth Alliance has only begun releasing their analysis of data for a few states and have already found anomalies sufficient enough to flip the vote in at least 2 states. As Taylor says,
and we're seeing the same effect in North Carolina, which it would be enough as well. The margin is 184,000. We have over 190,000 flagged anomalous votes. And it could be enough to change the outcome in Nevada as well.
As they continue their important work, it's vitally important that people stop worrying about whether or not they might appear like crazies on the right who screamed that the 2020 elections were rigged. They had no evidence to back up those claims. We already have a pile of evidence that, in fact, the 2024 election was stolen using a variety of techniques, including voter intimidation, vote suppression, destruction of ballots, and more. A growing pile of data is showing the election was also likely electronically hacked. Pretending that isn't true is just as crazy as any other form of reality denying. As more evidence keeps coming out proving Republicans stole the election, we will continue to say, "We effing told you so." You have been listening to the We Effing Told You So podcast. Please like and subscribe, and then share on your social media. You can find the We Effing Told You So blog on Substack. Find the podcast on Substack, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and any other place podcasts can be found. Thanks for listening.